Welcome back to another deep dive into the darkest corners of Fallout lore. Today, we are exploring something that should shake you to your core. The real truth about every single Vault-Tec experiment, told from the perspective of someone who helped design them. I found the master file buried 3 levels below Vault-Tec headquarters, and what I discovered there made me realize we were never meant to survive. They told us the vaults would save humanity, but I have seen the spreadsheets, the profit margins, the cold calculations that valued data over human lives. Every vault had a purpose, but not the one they advertised. I should know, because I helped design 23 of them. This is not speculation. This is not theory. This is confession from someone who was there. And if you genuinely enjoy this kind of dark storytelling, consider subscribing and liking the channel, but only if you like the content. This entire script is narrated from the first-person perspective of a Tenyu character from the Fallout universe. Their identity remains hidden throughout the story. After you have heard everything, try to guess which character is speaking in the comments below. The first person to guess correctly will have their comment pinned. Now, let us begin this journey into the heart of Vault-Tec's greatest evil and discover what every Vault experiment was really about. I found the master file buried 3 levels below Vault-Tec headquarters, and what I discovered there made me realize we were never meant to survive. The day was October 15th, 2077. 8 days before the bombs fell, I was working late in the Las Vegas regional office, optimizing oxygen recycler specifications for Vault 21. My clearance level was 7, which meant I knew enough to keep the life support systems running, but not enough to understand why we were building so many vaults that would never hold more than a fraction of America's population. That night, everything changed. I made a mistake that saved my life and damned my soul. I accessed Terminal 7 Alpha using my supervisor's credentials I had borrowed without permission to finish a report that was 3 weeks overdue. The file was labeled Societal Preservation Program Executive Summary. It required 3 separate authentication codes. I had 2 of them from my supervisor's notes. The third I guessed because Morris always used his daughter's birthday backwards. The file opened. I started reading. My hands began to shake before I finished the first page. They told us the vaults would save humanity, but I have seen the spreadsheets, the profit margins, the cold calculations that valued data over human lives. Every vault had a purpose, but not the one they advertised. I should know, because I helped design 23 of them, and I never understood what I was really building until that October night when the truth burned itself into my brain like radiation poisoning that never stops. Let me tell you what that file contained. Let me tell you what Vault-Tec really was, because someone needs to know. Someone needs to understand why the world ended the way it did, and why the vaults that were supposed to save us became laboratories of human suffering instead. I was a mid-level engineer at Vault-Tec, employee number V7-2847, stationed at the Las Vegas regional office for 6 years. My job was simple, or so I thought. I designed life support systems, oxygen recyclers that could run for 200 years without maintenance, water purification units that could process waste into drinking water indefinitely, air filtration systems calibrated to remove radiation particles down to 0.001 microns. I was good at my job. I received 3 commendations. My systems had a 99.7% efficiency rating. I thought I was saving lives. The file changed everything. Page 1 was a corporate memo from Barbara Howard, Executive Vice President of Vault-Tec. The subject line read, Vault Program True Objectives - Final Authorization. The first paragraph explained that the vaults were never intended as shelters. They were laboratories. 122 laboratories designed to test human behavior under extreme conditions. The purpose was data collection for something called Project Exodus, a multi-generational starship that would carry select individuals, the best and brightest, as they called them, to colonize another planet once Earth became uninhabitable. The Enclave wanted that data. The shadow government that would survive the nuclear war needed to know how humans would react to isolation, stress, radiation, social manipulation, psychological torture. They needed to know what would break us and what would make us stronger. They needed to know if humanity could survive a journey lasting centuries through the void of space. And Vault-Tec sold them 122 human experiments disguised as salvation. Only 17 vaults were designed as control groups. 17 out of 122. The rest had specific failure points built into their design, deliberate flaws, intentional cruelties, social experiments that would make the Stanford prison experiment look like a kindergarten field trip. I kept reading. The file detailed each vault's true purpose. Vault 8 was one of the 17 control vaults, designed to function normally and provide baseline data. Vault 13 was meant to stay sealed longer than any other, testing isolation effects on a population that believed they would eventually rejoin society. Vault 15 mixed people from radically different ideological backgrounds to study conflict and integration. These were the mild experiments, the ones that at least pretended to have scientific merit. Then came the others. Vault 11 inches New Mexico required residents to sacrifice one person annually or face complete extermination. The vault's computer would select the overseer, and that overseer had to die. Every single year, someone had to die, chosen by their neighbors, their friends, their family. The file included meeting minutes where executives laughed about the psychological torment this would cause. They predicted suicide rates, murder rates, the formation of death cults. They bid on the outcome like it was a football game. Vault 12 inches, Bakersfield, California, had a door that would not close properly. The vault was advertised as having the best radiation shielding in the entire program. Families paid premium prices for spots in Vault 12. When the bombs fell, that door stayed open just enough to let radiation seep inside. Not enough to kill instantly, just enough to transform the residents slowly into ghouls over months and years. The purpose was studying ghoulification for the Enclave's forced evolutionary virus research. West Tech paid Vault-Tec $12 million for exclusive rights to that data. I found my own work in those files. Vault 22's environmental systems that I had spent 8 months perfecting were designed to fail in a specific way. The agricultural research vault in the Mojave would develop genetically modified spores that would transform residents into plant-based organisms. My oxygen recyclers were calibrated to spread those spores efficiently throughout the vault's ventilation system. I had built the delivery mechanism for a biological nightmare, and I never knew it. Vault 75 beneath Malden Middle School was perhaps the cruelest. Parents and children were promised safety together. When the bombs fell, security teams separated the families at gunpoint. The parents were executed immediately, their bodies incinerated, while their children watched from behind reinforced glass. The children were then subjected to brutal physical and mental conditioning, training them as super soldiers through eugenics and selective breeding. At age 18, the genetically superior were harvested for their DNA, which meant killed and dissected, while the tacking to the fallen, others were terminated for being inadequate. The vault was designed to operate for generations, creating better and better specimens through forced evolution. But I had to stop reading. I walked to the bathroom and vomited until my throat burned, but I went back. I had to know everything. Vault 27 was deliberately overcrowded to twice its capacity. Vault 29 contained only children under age 15, with all parents redirected to other vaults. Vault 36's food supply was designed to spoil after the first year. Vault 42's lighting systems would fail, plunging residents into total darkness. Vault 43 contained 1,000 people and a single irradiated cat. Vault 68 housed 999 men and 1 woman. Vault 69 inverted the experiment. The files included betting pools about which vault would collapse into violence first. The executives treated human suffering like entertainment. Vault 87 inches, Washington, D.C. was designated for forced evolutionary virus testing. Residents would be infected with FEV and transformed into super mutants. The vault systems were designed to contain the mutants until they could be studied, but the file included a note that containment failure was expected and even desirable, as it would provide data on super mutant behavior in an uncontrolled environment. Vault 106 would release psychoactive drugs into the air filtration system 10 days after sealing. I designed that filtration system. I calibrated the airflow rates. I never questioned why the chemical storage tanks were 3 times larger than necessary. The drugs would cause paranoia, hallucinations, violence. The purpose was studying mass psychosis and its potential use as a weapon. The file noted that one of my designs, the emergency ventilation override, had been disabled specifically to ensure no one could stop the drug release once it started. Vault 108 contained a cloning laboratory. One resident named Gary would be cloned 54 times to test if manufactured humans could replace natural reproduction. Each clone became more violent and unstable than the last. The file predicted that the Gary clones would eventually kill everyone else in the vault. This outcome was not just acceptable, it was the goal. The experiment was designed to fail, so the Enclave could determine if human cloning was viable for their Starship program. Spoiler, the file concluded, it probably is not, but the data will be valuable regardless. Now here is something that will probably upset some of you. These experiments were not about survival or science or even military applications. They were about profit. The meeting minutes from July 2077 showed representatives from Robco Industries, West-Tec, Big MT, and Poseidon Energy sitting in a conference room in Vault-Tec headquarters, bidding on Vault experiments like fantasy football picks. Each corporation wanted specific data for their own projects. West-Tec wanted mutation research for their FEV program. Big MT wanted psychological warfare data. Robco wanted to test automated management systems. Poseidon Energy wanted to see if humans could be conditioned to work in extreme radiation environments. The corporations were not just clients, they were partners. They helped design the experiments. They provided funding, they shared technology, and they all knew the bombs were coming because they were planning to drop them themselves if necessary. That is what the file revealed on page 47. Barbara Howard, during a meeting with the other corporate executives, actually said the words, "We could ensure the experiments proceed by initiating the conflict ourselves." The other executives did not object. They discussed logistics, timeline, optimal targets. They talked about starting nuclear war, the same way middle managers talk about quarterly projections. The vaults were never about saving America. They were about controlling what came after. The Enclave and their corporate partners saw the apocalypse as the ultimate business opportunity, a chance to rebuild civilization without regulations, without oversight, without ethics. The vaults would provide the data they needed to create their perfect society among the stars, while Earth burned below. Every vault had a sponsor. Big MT claimed Vault 22's agricultural research. West-Tec owned the FEV mutations in Vault 87. Robco bought rights to Vault 11's psychological torture data. Poseidon Energy funded Vault 12's ghoulification study. Each experiment had a price tag. Each human life had a value calculated in dollars and data points. The file included financial projections. Vault-Tec expected to generate $4.7 billion in pure profit from the societal preservation program, not from saving people, from selling their suffering to the highest bidder. I found something else in that file, something that made my blood turn to ice water. There was a vault list organized by employee assignments: engineers, scientists, overseers, security personnel, all sorted by which vault they would be assigned to when the bombs fell. I searched for my name, found it on page 93. I was scheduled for Vault 84. I had never heard of Vault 84. It was not on any of the maps I had seen. It was not in any of the design specifications I had worked on. I clicked the vault designation, and a new file opened. Vault 84 was designated as a reconciliation vault. That was the official term. The purpose was simple. Any Vault-Tec employee who had gained too much knowledge about the True Vault program would be assigned to Vault 84. Once inside, they would be contained and monitored. The file specified that Vault 84 would receive no maintenance, no supplies, and no communication with the outside world. It was designed to last exactly 90 days before life support failed. They were going to murder everyone who knew the truth, me included. I printed everything, used the office printer at 2 in the morning, listening to every mechanical sound like it might be security coming to stop me. Printed all 416 pages of that evil document, shoved them in my briefcase, walked out of the building like nothing was wrong, drove home, did not sleep. The next morning, I started making calls, tried to warn people, tried to contact journalists, government officials, anyone who might listen. Every single person I reached either hung up or told me I was crazy, or, in 3 cases, disappeared within 24 hours of our conversation. Vault-Tec had infiltrated everything: the media, the government, law enforcement, even the unions. Anyone who might expose them had already been bought, blackmailed, or eliminated. If you are still with me after hearing this, hit that like and subscribe button. I spent the next 8 days trying to decide what to do. I had the evidence, I had the proof, but I had no way to expose it, no platform to share it, no protection from the consequences. I was one engineer with a briefcase full of damning documents against the most powerful corporation in America, backed by the shadow government and the military-industrial complex. On October 23, 2077, I was in my apartment in Las Vegas when the sirens started. The sirens started at 9:47 in the morning. I remember because I was staring at my watch, counting down the seconds like they meant something, like time was still something that mattered. The briefcase full of documents sat on my kitchen table. I had been awake for 72 hours straight, trying to figure out what to do with the truth I had stolen. The sirens answered that question for me. I grabbed the briefcase and ran, not to Vault 84, because I knew what waited there. Not to any official shelter, because I knew they were all traps. I ran to the storm drains beneath Las Vegas, the old maintenance tunnels that the city had forgotten about, the ones that flooded every few years and killed homeless people who sheltered there. I figured if I was going to die, I would rather drown in sewage than suffocate in Vault-Tec's execution chamber. The first bomb hit while I was underground. The tunnel shook like an earthquake, and dust rained from the ceiling. I pressed myself against the concrete wall and waited for it to collapse. It did not. The tunnels held. Above me, Las Vegas was being erased from existence, and I was huddled in the dark with a briefcase full of secrets that no longer mattered because everyone who needed to read them was probably already dead. I stayed in those tunnels for 11 days, drinking condensation that dripped from the pipes, eating rats I caught with my bare hands and cooked over a lighter flame. The radiation detector I had stolen from the office months ago, just in case, clicked constantly. Not high enough to kill me quickly, but high enough that I knew I was dying slowly. On the 12th day, I climbed out. Las Vegas was gone. The casinos, the lights, the illusion of endless prosperity. All of it had been replaced by a crater that glowed faintly green in the darkness. The sky was the color of infected flesh. The air tasted like copper and ash. I started walking, not away from the city, because there was nowhere to go that was not contaminated. I walked toward Vault 21, the vault I had helped design. The vault where my specifications had created oxygen recyclers that would keep people breathing for 200 years. I needed to know if it had worked. If anything I built had actually saved someone. The vault door was sealed when I arrived. I could hear machinery humming behind the steel, life support systems operating normally. My systems, people were alive inside. I had saved them. Even if I had damned so many others, I left them alone. They did not need to know what their salvation had cost. They did not need to know that their vault was one of the few designed to actually function as promised, that their survival was an accident of being part of the control group, that 17 other vaults might be functioning while 105 were already failing in horrible, calculated ways. I kept walking through the wasteland that used to be Nevada, through dust storms that stripped skin from exposed flesh, through radiation fields that made my detector scream. I was looking for other vaults, looking for evidence, looking for survivors who needed to know the truth. I found Vault 3 first. The door was open, not blasted open by raiders or warped by time. It was opened from the inside. The control vault had functioned correctly, and the residents had eventually decided to leave and rebuild. I found their bodies scattered around the entrance. Raiders had slaughtered them. Men, women, children, all murdered for the crime of trusting that the world had become safe again. I sat among the corpses for 3 hours, reading the journals they left behind. They had been so hopeful, so convinced that humanity would rebuild together. They had lasted almost 20 years inside the vault before water leak forced them out. 20 years of safety and then death within days of leaving. The water leak was not an accident. I knew that because I had read the Vault-Tec files. Water chip failures were designed obsolescence, built into specific vaults to force them open at predetermined intervals. Vault-Tec wanted to collect data on reintegration and surface adaptation. The residents of Vault 3 died to provide that data. I kept moving, found Vault 11 6 months later. The door was open there too, but from the inside, and much more recently, I climbed down into darkness, my flashlight revealing walls covered in graffiti. Vote for anyone but me, death to the overseer. We are all killers now. The vault's atrium floor was stained with decades of blood that had never been cleaned. I found the terminal logs, read about the annual sacrifices, read about the 5 survivors who finally refused to choose another victim, who were then told by the vault's computer that they had passed the test, that sacrifice had never been required, that they were shining examples of humanity. 4 of those 5 survivors immediately killed themselves. The guilt of what they had done, the people they had murdered to save themselves, it broke them completely. The 5th survivor had written one final entry. We won, but we lost everything. Then he left the vault alone. I searched for him, never found him. I like to think he survived somewhere, but I doubt it. The wasteland does not reward guilt. Some would call what those people did survival. Others would call it something much worse. They murdered their friends and neighbors for years, formed political parties based on who would die next, created a lottery of death, and called it democracy. What would you have done? Be honest in the comments. Would you have sacrificed others to save yourself, or would you have been the sacrifice? Because Vault-Tec designed that experiment, knowing that most people would choose survival over morality. That was the data they wanted. That was always the data they wanted. I found Vault 12 Inches Necropolis. The entire city was populated by ghouls, radiation-scarred survivors who had transformed into something no longer quite human. They remembered being normal, remembered their families, their lives before the vault door failed to close. They told me about the slow transformation, the pain, the watching their children's skin peel away while Vault-Tec's automated systems recorded everything. One ghoul, an old woman who said her name was Beatrice, grabbed my arm with a hand that felt like leather over bone. She said they knew. She said they figured it out within the first month that the door was supposed to fail, but they stayed anyway because leaving meant dying faster. She asked me if I knew why they suffered. I told her the truth. I told her Vault-Tec sold their pain to West-Tec for research money. She laughed. It sounded like rocks, grinding together. Then she tried to kill me. Her ghoul neighbors stopped her. They said someone needed to live to tell the story. They let me go. I spent the next year documenting vaults. Vault 15, where ideological conflicts had torn the population apart. Vault 19, where paranoia experiments had driven everyone to violence. Vault 22, where my agricultural systems had worked perfectly, distributing spores that transformed people into walking plant monsters. I found one researcher's body, partially consumed by the fungal growth he had studied. His last journal entry said he finally understood the beauty of forced evolution. I found Vault 27 collapsed under its own overcrowded weight. Too many people, not enough resources, predictable violence. The vault's logs showed Vault-Tec had monitored the situation remotely until the very end, recording population decline rates and resource consumption patterns. Valuable data for starship planning. Know your carrying capacity. Account for overcrowding scenarios. Let 1,000 people murder each other so you can build better life support systems. Vault 29 was the children's vault. I found it empty. All the kids were gone, taken somewhere else, or dead. I found toys scattered in the hallways, small handprints on walls that would never grow up. A teacher's log that said the children kept asking when their parents would come back. She had lied to them for 3 years before the vault's automated systems finally told them the truth. The children had been alone the entire time. The experiment was studying child development without parental influence. Another big MT project. Another batch of ruined lives for science. Vault 34 inches, the Mojave was flooded with radiation from a reactor leak. But before it leaked, the vault had been stocked with an enormous armory, guns everywhere. The experiment was testing if easy access to weapons would increase violence. It did. The residents formed factions, fought over resources, and eventually, one faction sabotaged the reactor to deny it to their enemies. Everyone died. Vault-Tec recorded the conflict timeline. Robco Industries paid for the data to improve their security robot protocols. I kept finding vaults, kept finding horrors. Vault 68 and 69 with their gender imbalance experiments. Vault 77 that had housed one man and a box of puppets. I found his trail, found the raider camps he destroyed, found the legend of the puppet man who had gone completely insane from isolation. Vault-Tec had predicted he would last 6 months. He lasted 3 years before escaping and becoming a wasteland serial killer. Unexpected result, the file noted. Subject demonstrated remarkable resilience. Recommend similar isolation protocols for starship scenarios. Vault 87 was inaccessible from the main entrance due to radiation, but I found the alternate entrance through little lamplight. Inside was a nightmare of super mutants, former humans transformed by forced evolutionary virus experiments. They were mindless, violent, powerful, perfect soldiers if they could be controlled. West-Tec had paid for this data. The transformation chambers were still active, still converting any wasteland survivors who wandered too close. I watched from the shadows as a raider was dragged into the green liquid, screaming, and emerged minutes later as a 10-foot-tall monster who could not remember his own name. I should have destroyed the facility. I had explosives by then, scavenged from military bases. I could have stopped the transformations, but I did not. I was too afraid, too weak, too broken by everything I had seen. I ran away and let the horror continue. That failure haunts me more than anything else. Vault 92 inches, the DC wasteland, had used subliminal white noise to create violent aggression. The entire population had murdered each other within months. I found a child's bedroom with the walls covered in blood handprints. The white noise generators were still running when I arrived, and within an hour, I felt rage building in my chest for no reason. I smashed the generators and left quickly. Vault 101 was different. The vault door was designed never to open. The experiment was studying indefinite isolation, but the overseer had become a tyrant, and eventually someone escaped. I found the overseer's logs. He knew the vault's true purpose. He had spent decades keeping that secret, maintaining the lie, until it drove him paranoid and cruel. He wrote that he sometimes dreamed of opening the door and leading everyone outside, but he was too afraid of failing the experiment, too afraid of Vault-Tec's judgment, even though Vault-Tec no longer existed. Vault 106 nearly killed me. I walked in without a gas mask, not knowing the psychoactive drugs were still pumping through the ventilation. Within minutes, I was hallucinating. Saw my mother, who had been dead for 15 years. Saw my supervisor from Vault-Tec telling me everything was forgiven. Saw children made of light offering to take me home. The drugs made me want to stay forever in that beautiful lie. I barely made it out. Spent 3 days vomiting while my brain chemistry rebalanced. The logs in Vault 106 explained that the drug release had been a test for chemical warfare agents. The Enclave wanted to know if they could pacify hostile populations through airborne psychotropics. The answer was yes. The Vault residents had welcomed their own insanity. Some had even written thank you notes to Vault-Tec as they descended into madness. Vault 108 was full of Gary, just Gary, dozens of clones, all saying the same name, all attacking anything that was not Gary. I shot my way through them, found the cloning lab, found the logs explaining that each clone was more violent than the last. The scientists had known this. They kept cloning him anyway. The final log entry said they planned to destroy the excess Garys to make room for new test subjects. The Garys killed them first. I stood in that cloning lab for an hour, trying to understand the logic. Why clone the same person 54 times when you know the process is flawed? The answer was in the data logs. Each clone's degradation pattern was slightly different. Each provided new information about genetic stability and cellular breakdown. The scientists were not trying to perfect cloning. They were trying to understand its limitations. More data for the Enclave's Starship program. Know which genetic lines can be reproduced and which cannot. 54 dead Garys to answer that question. Vault 111 inches. Boston was a cryogenic experiment. The entire population was frozen in suspended animation. They were told it was a decontamination procedure. They were not told they would be frozen for centuries. Most of the pods failed over time. I found hundreds of frozen corpses, their faces twisted in agony as they suffocated in their icy prisons. Only a handful of pods were still functioning. I did not open them. Let someone else make that decision. Let someone else explain to those frozen people that everyone they loved was dead. The Vault 111 logs revealed that the vault was meant to test long-duration cryo-storage for the Starship's colonists. The failure rate was deemed acceptable. 70% survival would be sufficient for the mission parameters. The logs recommended improved pod sealing mechanisms for future installations. They did not mention the names of the dead. Vault 112 was the worst. Dr. Stanislaus Braun had kept the entire population in a virtual reality simulation for over 2 centuries, and he tortured them for entertainment. The simulation was supposed to be a perfect paradise. Instead, Braun used it as his personal playground, creating scenarios where residents suffered and died over and over, their memories wiped each time so the torture would always feel fresh. I found the simulation mainframe, found recordings of Braun laughing as he made a woman watch her children die 1,000 different ways, found his notes about which psychological torments produced the most interesting neurological responses. I could have unplugged the simulation, could have freed the residents. But they had been in the pods for 200 years. Their bodies were atrophied beyond recovery. Waking them would mean death within hours. I left them in bronze hell because that was the only place they could still exist. Another failure, another choice I regret. You probably think you know how this story ends, but here is the part that will make you question everything. I kept finding vaults for 30 years. 30 years of walking through the wasteland, documenting horrors, collecting evidence, and the whole time I was dying. The radiation exposure from those first days after the bombs, the psychotropic drugs from Vault 106, the countless injuries and infections and chemical exposures. My body was failing gradually, transforming into something no longer entirely human. I started ghoulifying around year 15. Skin getting leathery, healing slower, needing less food and water. The transformation gave me time. Time to find more vaults, time to gather more evidence, time to understand the full scope of Vault-Tec's crimes. If you have ever wondered what choice you would really make when it counts, tell me in the comments. No judgment. Would you have kept going like I did, documenting atrocities you were too late to stop? Or would you have given up? Because some days, I think giving up would have been kinder to me and to everyone I found along the way. If this story has kept you listening this far, and you want more of these dark confessions from the wasteland, hit that like button. It really motivates me to create similar Fallout lores. The truth is, I am still out here, still searching for vaults I have not found yet. Still leaving these recordings in places where someone might hear them someday. The wasteland is huge, and there are vaults I know exist but have never been able to reach. Vaults buried too deep, or blocked by radiation, or controlled by factions that would kill me on sight. I found Vault 31 last year. That discovery changed everything I thought I understood about Vault-Tec's endgame. The vault was hidden beneath Los Angeles, connected to two other vaults through underground tunnels. Vaults 31, 32, and 33 formed a triangle, a three-vault system that operated as one interconnected experiment. On the surface, they appeared to be control vaults, safe havens where people could live normal lives and eventually repopulate the wasteland. But Vault 31 was different. It was filled entirely with cryogenic pods, not for regular citizens, for Vault-Tec executives. I found a brain in a jar attached to a robot chassis. The brain called itself Bud Askins. It had been a Vault-Tec senior junior vice president before the war. It told me everything because it thought I was one of the Vault residents. It told me about Bud's Buds, the executive training program where hand-picked Vault-Tec employees were frozen in time, waiting to be thawed out one by one to become overseers of Vaults 32 and 33. The residents of those vaults did not know. They thought Vault 31 was just like theirs. They married people from Vault 31, had children with them, never knowing they were breeding with corporate management designed to control them forever. The plan was elegant and horrifying. Vault-Tec executives would rule the wasteland by emerging from cryo over generations, always in positions of power, always controlling the population, always loyal to the corporation. Even though the corporation no longer existed, they would inherit the Earth after wiping the surface clean. Those were Bud Askin's exact words. Inherit the Earth, like it was real estate to be claimed, rather than a planet full of dead billions. I asked Bud how many executives were still frozen. It said 108. 108 Vault-Tec employees waiting to wake up and continue the experiment, continue controlling people who had no idea they were being controlled, continue the lie that had killed the world. I could have destroyed them, could have opened the cryo chamber and let them all die, but I did not, because by then I had realized something terrible about myself. I had become part of the experiment. Every vault I documented, every horror I recorded, every piece of evidence I collected was exactly what Vault-Tec had designed the vaults to produce: data, information, proof that their experiments worked or failed in specific, measurable ways. I was doing their job for them, even after the world ended. Even after everyone who ordered these experiments was dead, I was still collecting their data, still analyzing their results, still operating within the system they built. The perfect subject, an engineer with just enough knowledge to understand what he was seeing, but not enough power to stop it. Clearance level 7. Forever. That realization broke something in me that had not broken in 30 years of wasteland horror. I sat in Vault 31's control room for 3 days, staring at those cryopods, understanding that I was not the hero of this story. I was just another data point, another variable in Vault-Tec's endless experiment. Vault 32 had figured it out. The residents had discovered the truth about Vault 31's executives, and they had rebelled. They killed their overseer, destroyed their vault, killed each other rather than continue living the lie. I found their corpses piled against the door to Vault 31, their hands bloody from trying to claw through the steel. They chose death over being controlled. Maybe they were braver than me. Maybe they were just more honest about what freedom actually costs. I left Vault 31 sealed, left those executives frozen, let Bud Askins continue believing the experiment was working, because what else was there to do? Wake them up and tell them they won? Tell them the world they destroyed was waiting for them to rule? Or kill them and become the very thing Vault-Tec had created me to be, a man who decides who lives and dies based on data and calculations? I have been walking for 33 years now. My skin is almost completely gone, replaced by thick, radiation-scarred tissue. My lungs do not need air the way they used to. My body is transforming into something that can survive the wasteland indefinitely. The ghoulification that should have killed me is instead making me immortal. I will walk forever through the ruins of Vault-Tec's experiments, documenting failure after failure, learning nothing that can save anyone, because everyone who needed saving died in 2077. But I keep going because someone needs to know. Someone needs to understand that the vaults were not a failure of good intentions. They were the success of evil ones. Every corpse I found, every transformed monster, every mad survivor was exactly what Vault-Tec planned. They got their data, they got their results. The fact that the Enclave never built their starship, never escaped to the stars, never used the information they collected, does not change what was done. The water chip failures were not accidents. The ventilation malfunctions were not engineering mistakes. The psychological breaks were not unforeseen consequences. It was all designed, all calculated, all profitable. I think about the meeting that Barbara Howard held, the one in the classified files. The meeting where she suggested they could ensure the experiments proceeded by starting the war themselves. I wonder if she did it. I wonder if Vault-Tec launched the first missiles. I wonder if it even matters who pushed the button when everyone was planning to push it eventually. The corporations saw the apocalypse as a business opportunity, a chance to rebuild without regulations, without ethics, without anyone to answer to. They were right. The wasteland belongs to whoever is ruthless enough to claim it. The Brotherhood hoards technology. The Enclave dreams of genetic purity. The raiders take what they want. The merchants sell to the highest bidder. Everyone learned the lesson that Vault-Tec taught. Humanity is just data. Life is just resources. Morality is just inefficiency. I found a holotape in Vault 13, hidden in the Overseer's office. It was a message from Vault-Tec headquarters, sent just before the bombs fell. The message said the experiment was proceeding as planned. It thanked the Overseer for his service. It reminded him that the data he collected would ensure humanity's survival among the stars. It was dated October 22nd, 2077, one day before the world ended. They knew exactly when the bombs would fall because they had probably set the timer themselves. The Overseer of Vault 13 kept that holotape hidden for decades. Eventually, he exiled a Vault Dweller who was disrupting the experiment by being too successful at survival, too good at adaptation. That Vault Dweller went on to save the wasteland from the Master's army, became a legend. The Overseer's logs show he felt guilty about the exile, but did it anyway, because the experiment had to continue, because Vault-Tec's directives mattered more than human lives, even after Vault-Tec was ash and radiation. If this confession meant something to you, leave a like. It is the only way I know you liked the video. I am tired, not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, the kind of tired that comes from carrying the truth for longer than anyone should have to carry anything. I have walked past communities trying to rebuild, past settlements forming governments, past children playing in the ruins who will never know what the world was before. I could tell them, could show them the documents I still carry in the waterproof case I found in Vault 8, could explain exactly how and why their world was destroyed. But what good would it do? The people who gave the orders are dead. The corporations that profited are ruins. The Enclave is scattered and defeated. Vault-Tec is a logo on rusty signs and a warning in bedtime stories. The monster is already dead. Killing it again changes nothing. So I keep walking, keep documenting, keep recording these confessions in the hope that someday someone will understand what was done to us. Not just the bombs, not just the radiation, but the cold, deliberate transformation of human survival into human experimentation, the reduction of hope into data points, the murder of 400 million people to answer the question of whether the other few hundred could be controlled efficiently enough for space travel. They got their answer. We can be controlled. We can be manipulated. We can be sorted into experimental groups and driven to murder or madness or transformation. We can be made to sacrifice our children, eat our neighbors, worship our torturers, and call it survival. Vault-Tec proved that humanity will do anything to stay alive. The irony is that the proof came from watching us die. I sometimes wonder what happened to the other engineers, the ones who built the vaults with me, who calibrated the life support systems, who designed the water purification and the air recyclers and the radiation shielding. Did they make it to their assigned vaults? Did they die in Vault 84 when the life support failed after 90 days as planned? Or did some of them figure it out, like I did, and run? I will never know. I am the only one who has been documenting this. The only one leaving recordings and written evidence and physical proof that Vault-Tec's crimes were not accidents but policy. Maybe that makes me the last Vault-Tec employee still working, still collecting data, still filing reports that no one will ever read. Employee number V, 7-2847, clearance level 7, status, active. The wasteland has its own beauty now. I have walked through what used to be California and seen flowers growing in radioactive soil. I have watched ghouls build communities, super mutants learn to speak, children born without ever knowing what a nuclear bomb was. Life continues. It adapts. It finds ways to survive that Vault-Tec never predicted and could never control. But I also see the scars. The raiders who learned from Vault-Tec that human life has no value, the slavers who treat people as resources, the corrupt leaders who rule through fear and manipulation. Vault-Tec may be dead, but its philosophy survived, spread through the wasteland like radiation, infected every settlement and faction. We are all living in Vault-Tec's experiment now. The whole world is Vault Zero, and we are all subjects. I know some of you are wondering who I am, what my name is, whether anyone in the wasteland knows my story. The truth is, it does not matter. I am just a ghoul who used to be an engineer, just another victim of corporate evil who survived long enough to become its chronicler. My name died with my pre-war life. What remains is just this voice, these recordings, this endless documentation of what was lost. But if you must know, if you need a name to put on this confession, then call me what I am. Call me Subject V, 7-2847. Call me the engineer. Call me the witness. Call me the man who helped build the cages and then spent the rest of his immortal life counting the bones inside them. I built Vault 21's oxygen recyclers, and they still work. I designed Vault 22's ventilation systems, and they still spread spores. I calibrated Vault 106's filtration units, and they still pump psychotropic drugs into empty hallways. My work continues without me. My calculations keep functioning. My designs keep killing. I am more successful dead than I ever was alive. That is what Vault-Tec did to all of us. Made us complicit, made us part of the machine, made us into either victims or architects or both at once. Even now, walking through the wasteland as a ghoul that should not exist, I am still operating within the parameters they set, still behaving like a good employee, still filing reports, still collecting data. The only rebellion I have left is this: these recordings, this testimony, this refusal to let the truth die, even though it changes nothing. Vault-Tec wanted data. I am giving them confession instead. They wanted proof that their experiments worked. I am providing proof that their entire enterprise was evil. They wanted to control humanity's future. I am documenting that they only controlled humanity's suffering. It is not enough. It will never be enough, but it is all I have. If you find this recording, know that I am still out there somewhere, still walking, still documenting, still trying to atone for the vaults I helped build by bearing witness to the ones I could not save. I am the ghost in Vault-Tec's machine, the error in their calculations, the variable they did not account for. I am the engineer who survived, and I will never stop telling you what they did to us. I will never stop saying their names. Vault 1 through Vault 122. 122 experiments. 122 human failures measured and recorded and profited from. Each one was someone's home. Each one was someone's hope. Each one was someone's grave. The world ended on October 23rd, 2077, but Vault-Tec killed it long before that. They killed it in the meeting rooms where they designed the experiments. They killed it in the laboratories where they tested the psychological torture techniques. They killed it in the corporate offices where they calculated the profit margins on human suffering. The bombs were just the final step, the logical conclusion, the inevitable result of a philosophy that treated people as data points to be collected and discarded. I have been collecting my own data for 33 years. Data about what humans become when everything they trusted betrays them. Data about how communities form in the ruins of deliberate evil. Data about whether hope can survive when you know exactly how and why your world was destroyed. My conclusion is this: we survived. Not because Vault-Tec's experiments worked, but because they failed. We survived because humans are more than data, more than variables, more than subjects in someone else's research. We survived because even in the vaults designed to break us, people found ways to resist, to rebel, to refuse the narrative they were given. Vault 11's last 5 survivors who refused to kill again. Vault 13's exile who saved the wasteland. The children of Vault 75 who eventually died fighting their captors. The ghouls of Vault 12 who built Necropolis from their own suffering. Every failed experiment contains someone who said no, someone who chose something other than survival at any cost, someone who proved Vault-Tec wrong. That is my final report, Vault-Tec. Your experiments failed, not because the data was bad, but because the premise was wrong. You cannot reduce humanity to numbers and expect those numbers to obey. You cannot engineer societies without creating rebellion. You cannot torture people into perfection. You failed, and we survived. And I will spend whatever immortality this ghoul body gives me, making sure everyone knows it. This is Subject V, 7-2847, signing off, but not signing out. Never signing out. I will continue to document, continue to record, continue to witness, until either the wasteland kills me, or I run out of vaults to explore, or someone finally listens to what I have been saying for 3 decades. Vault-Tec murdered the world, but the world refused to die. Remember that.